transformation story, the story of your affections, the thing that matter most to you. And God desires to win your heart through worship. God's mission comes to birth in a life of abandon to his love and mercy. Everything is at work to form you into all that God has for you. God is after your heart, to give him worship in the smallest and most ordinary things, as well as the highlights and the wonderful blessings that come our way. God is after your heart, to worship him in the suffering and to worship him in the glory. When I think of worship and what it means to have a heart that seeks after God, what better person to look to than David and his many psalms? The book of Psalms contains David's own words, his heart poured out. David shares with us both the good and the bad days of human existence. I mean, we see David's honesty poured out in Psalm 51. David repents of lust, greed, adultery, and even murder. David and much of the Psalms bring us to a place of worship in the beauty and a place of worship in the brokenness. God is after our hearts, and the heart is a place where we choose whether or not to participate in the life that God has for us. From the heart, we choose to be obedient or disobedient. We choose life or death. Looking to the Psalms, we see the language of worship is the language of the heart. That's why when we read through the Psalms, it connects to our heart on so many levels. The Psalms are worship. When we worship God, we give our hearts to him. We praise and honor him. It focuses our hearts on what is true and right. Many times, even in my own life, I remind myself to keep my focus on him, to worship him, even in the midst of turmoil, of struggle and pain. Worship helps me keep my eyes on him, and even when things are going well, I desire to set my heart on God, to worship him, and live my life full of thanks. I mean, that's my choice. I'm going to hold on to the heart seeker. And worship just isn't something we do on Saturday night or Sunday morning service. It's an ongoing, everyday posture of our heart. Turning our hearts toward him is a daily act of obedience, a rhythm we seek to maintain. Worship becomes a posture of our heart, and it becomes ongoing and not simply an event to attend on the weekend. Worship impacts our thoughts, our actions, our interactions with others. Let everything we do praise the Lord. We all worship something with our hearts. The choice is ours of what we will worship. And God is our maker. He knows us best, and he plans not to harm us, but to give us a hope and a future. Will we worship him? When we worship God, he wins our hearts. And when he wins our hearts, it allows him to shape our hearts, and he guides our steps. When we worship God, this allows us to be present before him, to be aware of his presence in our daily lives. When we worship God, it changes our hearts, aligning our hearts to his. It becomes less about me and more about him and his plan for me. When we worship, we let our hearts break for what breaks his. When we worship God, we remember all that he has done for us. We remember that he sent his son Jesus to restore our relationship with him. And we must remember that we belong to him, and he desires to be in relationship with us. Worship is when we know that we are loved by God, no matter what happens in the past, present, or what will happen in the future. His love is unconditional, even through all our mistakes, all our pains, and the grittiness of life. His love for us is wide, it's deep, it's encompassing and overwhelming. Worship is accepting his love for you and letting him change your heart. God is after your heart. Will you give it to him each and every day?